I want to talk about significance. How do we know if a value is significant and what does it mean? So, significant means that the value is statistically significant. So let's be clear here, because back in chapter 1 we talked about the difference between statistical significance and practical significance. Practical significance is, okay, cool, my friend told me this works. I know things that work for my friend also work for me. You don't need data to know that. But then statistically significant, I can prove a lot of things statistically, but they're not all that useful. For instance, I can statistically prove, on average, men are taller than women. Cool. You already knew that. Not all that useful of information, right? And obviously there's plenty of women who are taller than men, vice versa. But I can prove on average. Not useful. So there is a little bit of leeway there. But when I'm talking about significant, there are two main ways we prove statistical significance. The first way is if you get, and this is something we've looked at before, we've looked at the range rule of thumb. And that's the mean plus or minus 2 standard deviations. Okay, so if a value is 2 standard deviations above the mean or 2 standard deviations below, we consider that value significant. So a student performs 2 standard deviations above the mean on a standardized test, that's significant. That student did extremely well. That means I want to look at that. Maybe they're in a class that's too easy for them. Or if they perform 2 standard deviations below, maybe the class is too hard for them. Things like that. So those are why I would do that. So first way, and this is what we've already talked about back in chapter 3, is the range rule of thumb. We take the mean, 2 standard deviations either way. Those are considered my normal. Anything within 2 standard deviations are considered my normal values. If I'm outside of that range, more than 2 standard deviations away from the mean, it's considered significant. Okay? Or unusual is another word. Okay? So significant, you might see unusual. You also might see them talk about rare event. Whatever. All those mean the same thing. The other way, and that's what we're talking about now here with probability, is we're going to use the value 0.05. If something occurs less than 5% of the time, we consider it significant, unusual, rare. So if when we do a probability, we get a value that is less than 0.05, so in other words, it happens less than 5% of the time, we consider that significant. Now, you can actually set this whatever you want. And as we go forward, you're going to sometimes see this change. We're going to talk about significance level a lot. And if they don't tell you, usually they mean 0.05 if they don't set it. And if someone's setting a value, they usually set 0.05. But there might be reasons you set something different. For instance, a lot of medical tests run with 0.01. I get side effects less than 1% of the time, or maybe even, depending on what the side effects are, they might decide it has to be 0.5%, 99.5% of the time. So you'll see different values, and they usually have to do with what is going on. For instance, medical tends to be more stringent. You're giving something that could really hurt them, possibly even kill them, more stringent than I'm trying to decide how many, new shoes to order. Well, I'll eventually be able to clearance them, do something. Probably won't make or break if I get a couple extra pairs of shoes. You might decide to go 10%. So you will see some different values in that, but if they don't tell you, 5% is the general one. So these are our two ways to tell significance. That range rule of thumb we already talked about, but what we're introducing in this chapter is this idea that if it occurs less than 5% of the time, it's considered significant or unusual. In other words, that's a small enough portion of the time that it makes me go, oh, that seems weird that it happened. It would be a shock for this to happen, so therefore maybe I need to look into this. And as I said, you will see going forward sometimes that level of significance change, but the most standard one is this 0.05. So hopefully this helps you understand this idea of significance, and this is really just telling us what should perk our interest. What is different, what's rare, unusual, whatever that word, significant is the word they're using. But there's lots of other words we could put in that place. And you'll see sometimes they use some of those different ones.